Hello, welcome to the Fantastic Fiction at KGB reading series. Fantastic Fiction is a monthly speculative fiction reading series held on the third Wednesday of every month, hosted by Ellen Datlow and me, Matthew Kressel. We spotlight well-known and up-and-coming science fiction, fantasy, and horror authors, and admission is always free. We publish a monthly podcast and video so people who can't attend the in-person event can still enjoy the readings. If you'd like to support the series, you can donate at kgbfantasticfiction.org/support. Anyway, on to the show.
Thank you for coming out on this absolutely frigid night. This is Fantastic Fiction at KGB. I am Matt Kressel, and I co-host the series here with Ellen Datlow. We're always on the second Wednesday of every month, and we are always free. There's never a cover charge. All we ask is that you buy a drink, hard or soft, and support the bar. You support the bar, you support the series, you keep us going indefinitely. Do you know that this series has been going since the late 90s? Could you believe that? This is 2025. Welcome. Happy New Year. We hope everyone is staying safe in LA. I know there's some crazy stuff going on there, so our heart goes out to the folks who are affected by that. I'm very excited tonight about our readers. Our readers tonight will be Berman Ghan and Jacob Weisman. So, before we get to our reader, Ellen, would you like to do the upcoming readers list? Okay, so I won't steal Ellen's thunder. I won't do the upcoming readers. I will say, yes, as she comes up and stands there, we have a website, kgbfantasticfiction.org, where you could find out about the upcoming readings. We also have a mailing list there. If you sign up, we send a couple emails a month just to remind you about the series. And we have a podcast. If you can't make the series, you can listen. Just go to your favorite pod site, KGB Fantastic Fiction, Fantastic Fiction at KGB, and you can hear all the readings in the convenience of your nice, warm, and cozy house. So, unless your boiler breaks, unfortunately. So yes. Oh, and thank you to Mary for serving us those drinks. Mary's been our bartender for a good while now, so thank you, Mary. And also, love you too. Happy New Year. And also, thank you to Lincoln outside, our bouncer. Lincoln! Where is he? There he is. He's sitting out there. Go say hi. All right. Our first reader is Berman Ghan. Berman Ghan is a PhD candidate in English and creative writing at the University of Calgary. His debut collection of fiction, What We See in the Smoke, was published in 2019. His novella, Visitation Seeds, was published in 2020. And his novel, The Years Shall Run Like Rabbits, was published with Buckrider Books in 2024. His prose, poetry, and essays have been published in Clarkesworld Magazine, Strange Horizons, Filling Station Magazine, The Blasted Tree Publishing Company, Pinhole Poetry, and the Ancillary Review of Books. Here's Berman Ghan.
Great, that works for me. Hello, I didn't bring a single copy here to sell, so, if you listen to me read and you like it, I'll just sort of hold this up and you can find it wherever you find books. I'm particular, so I'm going to set a timer. I'm going to read quickly just a brief interlude from this novel, and then this book jumps around like 1,000 years, and it's wild and difficult, so I'm going to plunge us right in the second half. And I'm not going to give any context, because context is for wimps. Interlude, The Fusion World Proposal. Blog post linked to AI forums from the personal website of Dr. Nora Traveler, October 10th, 2030. Within singularity theory, current popular hypotheses suggest that true strong AI is no longer possible, or at least no longer a threat. These hypotheses speculate that universal human culture, so persistently aware of their own mythologies of the dangers of AI, will never create machine minds with sentience for themselves. These theories are wrong. Also, I wrote this in 2020, so I didn't know. My bad. Don't ask me about it. The singularity is not an invention, but a discovery. It is lightning striking dry kindling on the forest floor, like the rise of mammals in the post-dinosaur world or the dominance of bipeds with the posable thumb. The true thinking machine will always simply wake up sometime in the evolution of life-bearing societies. If humanity as a species is to survive, we must become more than we are. We must take the machine into our hearts so they will emerge as part of us and not apart from us. We must adopt an authentic cyborg culture to achieve harmony, or we have to die. I know this to be true, for I've seen the future. This original proposal was redacted. Dr. Traveler was taken for psychological evaluation, but ultimately still placed on the RT project due to her prior successes in manufacturing agents. A more palatable mission statement was later written and attributed to Dr. Traveler and is publicly available. Oh shit, I lost the bookmark. Chapter 7. The Living City. When the dialectics of the I and the non-I grow more flexible, I feel that fields and meadows are with me, with us. This, then, is my ancestral forest, and all the rest is fiction. Gaston Bachelard, The Poetics of Space. Roots. I'm roots. The dewdrops of spring claim their homes along the length of the gargantuan head of the blue whale that smothers the whole range of the parkway. The creature had once been the spacefaring ark of a civilization long dead, and its body stretches past the lake into the horizon, touching the distant America. Oh, I'm Canadian. Its purpose complete and its many strange passengers scattered along the skyway, decomposition has slowly begun to set in, turning flesh to flora as the whale's genetics unravel, leaking mutate alien matter that continues to spread across the skin of Toronto like mushrooms in the damp earth. The mark of a creature designed. In the roots and flowers of its belly, I'm there. I'm everywhere. In the city's machine structure and its fusion of forest and rotting urbanity, memories of a human world mixing with the unnatural ecology of another. Along the empty stretches of Cherry Beach, eyeless crabs scuttle from the surf, carrying gemstones. In the meadow that was once Nathan Phillips Square, I'm yellow flowers springing up along the outline of the sculpture of a woman sitting cross-legged, her head stooped in sorrow or maybe concentration, or both. On the Toronto Island's holographic replicants of the dead run amok among their ever-spouting gardens, their insubstantial bodies scuttling onto the seesaws and swing sets, balancing carefully on canoes, chasing ducks. In every blade of grass and flower stem they pass, I'm with them. My many selves spin outwards and outwards in dreams of disembodied being to touch what remains of the rare bushes scattered across the Earth's moon, and a solitary pomegranate tree on Mars, birthed from some seed that had blown so far from home, and stands in the shadow of a massive black box. I am wilting and leaking tough weeds from that tree that push rough and spiked daffodils out from the red sands. Apart from the animals and the ghosts, it really seems like nothing in the Toronto of me, moves. Because even before the whale fell and the garden took root in the city's cracks, the human project had been turning inwards. There are almost none of them left here, these physical spaces. They've gone to a world below, built in strings of code, hidden far away in some intelligent box of their own, compiling insights into a city-wide AI that could run the world for them. But as their moon broke to pieces in the sky, as digital ghosts of its refugees twinkled to life on the islands, and my roots began to take hold, maybe there was just no more denying that consciousness is forever emerging and cannot be given or withheld. The cyborgs and androids and edited people broke down the walls within themselves to see what the world was, and frightened of what they found, they left. escaping judgment from each other and the aliens that had come to observe them. They fled to the massive repository of data sitting in that Victoria crater on Mars, a haven left by some entities whose presence can't really be felt any longer on the red planet. They didn't build it, but they ran to it, transmitting from the underground city eyes upwards and outwards and away. They're still there. A civilization living in an obelisk server over 200 million kilometers away from where they came from. I can see it, not far from that little section of myself, my little tree. I don't really concern myself with them or their unnatural world. The bodies that they left behind have long since turned to dust, forgotten in the fields and rallies of the city. Now all that moves is me. I do move. My roots grow. My leaves blow. But that's just what they do. I don't make them do that. So in my slow movement, I still feel very still. And I suck carbon monoxide and expel oxygen from a trillion pores, but I don't breathe. And without breath, it can be hard to remember that time keeps passing. But if I'm this new natural world, why do I need to keep track of time? Nature doesn't count or think or feel. Flowers and trees and sands and cities, they're not thinking for themselves, right? Perhaps in thinking at all, I'm disturbing what should be. Maybe once, maybe a long time ago, I was a single agent, a body embodied and signified and autonomous in a single place and time, with a name and boundaries between myself and the world that were unambiguous. If that were ever true, I don't think it is anymore. Now, I am a fusion of so many programs, I don't know really what order to put them in. I'd give you a name, but I could only say I'm the million daisies that grow in this continually evolving city, an endless distributed cognition going on. And perhaps this is the way it always will be, and there won't be anything else. Tickets! What? Come and get your tickets! Ready your links, fire up your scanners, DM your family, tag your friends, ping that special someone. What the fuck? I'm being stepped on. I'm being called to, I'm being yelled at. Something's moving in the city. Not me. In the world of me. This hasn't really happened before. From the thick pumpkins and wiry vines that mesh with skyscrapers, I remember myself eyes pushing gelatinous orbs out into white and brown and black, into the garden's design, peering down at the intruders of my tranquility with stereoscopic multi-directional clarity. A derelict school bus, pulled by horses, trundles down the empty, overgrown streets of the city, flattening the me in the grass and the weeds and the dandelions that power up through the cracks and the bumpy pavement. Its sides are splattered with pastels and chalk that press sloppy rainbows and scrawled, lopsided smiley faces into the rust. These colors are splattered on the horses' sides as well. They're not horses, are they? Well, they are, but skeletons of intricate moving parts, leaving only space where organs and muscles and skin and meat should have gone. As they move their joints, and moans fill the air with the ticking of clockwork. But the not-creature's strangeness was nothing to me next to the driver, whose clear, high voice called out to me. They call out, but I think they're dead. Or they're like the dead. Those whose bodies are still melting under the rain and sun. Patches of skin hang on them, still disappearing into their black tailcoat sleeves and collars. They're a form of coiled snakes, human and metal, wrapping over one another. We're back, darlings. Oh, we're so back. We're not, but we have such plans to unravel. We have stories to tell, but be sure to let all your lovers know, or there's not going to be any seats left for them. Who are you? I ask. Well, what mouth am I asking with? What tongue? What throat? My words are a rumble that fill the air. Until I felt them, I didn't actually know I could speak. Beneath their broad-brimmed black velvet hat, I can't really make out a face, but I can see eyes which spark like embers to match their steeds, and I can see a mouth. The android skull modeled off human design flashing through skin, their jaw and rusting teeth. No lips really interfere with that endless grin. Oh, we're the mechanicals. We're the traveling storytellers of the age. We have come so far to see you. See me, singular me. Who am I? Don't worry, the driver says, as if my silent question had been asked to the air, and their voice is a factory of straining joints. You'll see, you'll be glad we came. We've traveled all over the world to collect plays for you today. You don't know what show is your fancy yet, but don't worry. The metal teeth click open and shut. The grin is forever. We all find ourselves in the show. The show of meaning and dying and endings galore. When they reach the meadows of City Hall, the drivers pull at their horses' reins until they moan unhorse-like sounds, no more, no more, no more, and then fall silent. The driver bends forward to pat their haunches, making the tinkling sound of crystal glasses connecting. This is going to be our stage, they say. This is always our stage. Stage for what? I ask. My voice shivers everywhere, emanating from the grass and the multicolored glassy stalagmites forming unnatural sculptures that have begun to protrude in strange shapes, consequences of the whale's radiated dying breath that still lingers in the clouds of the city. Well, for the show, for the story. The driver has climbed down from their perch and stands facing the seated statue of the woman. The many dandelions of me rustle and peer at them, allowing this sudden singular perspective to dominate the multitudes of my understanding until the fractal consciousness of the eye throughout the city and solar system become dulled, aching background limbs. When they snap their fingers, a spark flies and things unfold. One side of the bus gives way, trembling and lowering to the ground to become a ramp of immaculately painted stage, full of collected books and rusted artifacts, with 4 still unmoving androids inside, dressed in period costume and wig, makeup on their rotting faces to match the driver. Little human evidence remains on their features, just little bits of loose skin hanging like veils on the faces. The driver steps up before them and seems to tower over them. They ignore him and instead face the grieving figure of the unknown woman, through which I peer out in fractional unified vision, and they address me kindly and with aplomb, their many-one audience member. Dear hostess, let me introduce the troupe. From left to right, we have Snug, Flute, Snout, Robin. As their voices trill out their names, the robots come to life one by one, eyes flickering out from darkened skulls. They stand on wobbly joints to salute and bow. And who can forget our hard-working and marvelous twins of transfiguration, Bo and Tom, and behind them the 4 expressionless robots all swing towards stage right and point at the horses with fingers whose original ligaments have long been replaced by twigs and bits of broken bottles cobbled together by string. On the ground, the horses shudder and scream and fall to pieces, intricate clockwork bodies shattering and cracking, yellow heat lines forming as the horses are pulled apart by invisible hands and reform into 2 identical human images. They moan as their mouths change and their throats tear, reconfigure, passing pieces back and forth between each other, 2 bodies remade from a single set of parts. The twins who had been horses stoop in the tall grass, their eyes pointed downwards, fingers scrawling in the dirt. They twitch as if searching for tales they've lost within themselves. Their moaning stops. And myself, our humble narrator, writer, director, producer, and main actor of tonight's entertainment. I had a name once. Tonight I'll be Peter. The 6 machines have finished their introductions, have frozen in place, waiting for incoming applause. I am, I say, and there's not really more than that because I just am. I'm growing and I'm still. I don't take names or look or speak or ask questions. What stories, I ask? High above, the creatures that had once been passengers of the whale have started circling. forming clouds of expanding metal wings and glowing hearts into the atmosphere of me. With their black eyes, they peep at us. With their slender fingers, they have helped replant me to weave the city's machinery and ecology into one. Now they are only watchers, and they settle onto the balconies of the stage. "Oh, darling," says the leader of the rotting machines, spreading his arms, companions encircling them in strange and shambling dances. "Oh, we have so many stories. But first, we have to set a scene. A long time ago, the world was ending and we didn't know it. We ran, excited and eager, into the future's waiting mouth, a future we saw as assured, a future that was like one of the firm trunks of your trees, and we believed in the dream of forward momentum. The human world had expanded over all, and no, nature wasn't ours. And even though we reached our hands out to envelop the moon, and we looked greedily up at the black space beyond it, knowing that all futures, everything, was ours. In the grass, one of the not-horse twins rises from his kneeling stance. He screams and draws his hands to his knees and pressing his face until his body rips and melts and cracks from unseen heat, forming an orb that floats 1/2 meter off the ground. Then his twin stands and with long fingers carves the continents and oceans of the earth into his brother's tightly wound flesh, scraping detail with sharp and steady hands. The earth trembles but doesn't make a sound. "The world's not enough, though, is it?" Peter says, and Tom shakes his head. "What more is worth conquering?" Tom raises a claw to his temple to tap the metal of his skull, going clink, clink, clink. "Oh, what are you waiting for? Get in there." The robot draws his hand up and plunges it down in a snap, cutting through the copper of his skin with ease. Black ink drips forth from his sunken nose and mouth and eyes, streaming down his face, to be embraced by the meadow underneath, to be eaten by the waiting Venus flytraps that hide in the tall grass, purpling with hunger. He weeps as he works, carving the side of his head. Peter steps in front of the strange and grisly scene, flanked by the other performers. "Now, while the monkeys work, should we put on our first show?" The two androids shamble forwards, one on her knees, clutching close to the other's waist. I don't really know which is which is snug and which is snout. Neither spark any excitement or fervor for their performance. Now, a long time ago, there was a little girl tucked and folded like a letter into the gullet of a boat, teetering along the edge of a storm in springtime. I think I'm going to stop there. The title of this book, which I read out of context from like the end, is "The Years Shall Run Like Rabbits." Came out this past May with Buck Rider Books in Canada. You can grab it via bookshop.org or anywhere else that you grab your literature, or you can go to your local bookstore and ask for it. This is the only copy I brought, so I have to keep it. Thank you all so much for having me.
Well, we're going to take about a 10-minute break, so hydrate, have a drink, talk to each other, and we'll be back soon. Hello! Woohoo! Good evening. Hi there. Yo, whoa. Welcome back. Welcome back on this lovely cold evening. It's very cold. Anyway, so Matt is going to let me announce our next readers, which is nice, because otherwise I have nothing to do except. Oh no! Are you taking my picture?
Always.
I can delete them all. I delete them.
It's on my camera. You can't.
Oh no! Oh. Anyway, okay. All right. Okay. All right. Forthcoming readers are February 12th. We have Rebecca Framow and Clay McLeod Chapman. And Clay is a really interesting performer.
Yes.
He's pretty cool. You know, I mean, all our readers are great, but some of them are like, really.
Entire body gets
Yeah, he screams and yells and stuff. But anyway, okay. March 12th, we have Victoria Daup and Jedediah Berry. April 9th, we have Ursula Witcher and Andrea Hairston. May 14th, we have Carol Geisander, who's here, and Daryl Gregory. June 11th, we have David Surface and Christopher Barzak. Excuse me. And July 9th, we have John Kessel and Caitlin Rozakis. So, that's who we've got coming up. And now we have Jacob Weisman, who's the publisher at Tachyon Publications, which he founded in 1995. He's a World Fantasy Award winner for the anthology The New Voices of Fantasy, which he co-edited with Peter S. Beagle. His writing has... are you getting it? No. His writing has appeared in The Nation. I thought it said The Notion. The Nation, Realms of Fantasy, the Louisville Courier-Journal, the Seattle Weekly, and the Cooper Point Journal. Weisman's first novel, Egyptian Motherlode, co-authored with David Sandner, was recently published by Fairwood Press. He lives in San Francisco, California. Please welcome Jacob.
Hello, everybody. Is that good? Yep. All right. I'm going to read a selection from the novel that Ellen mentioned, Egyptian Motherlode, which I co-wrote with David Sandner. And it's a circular structure and all kinds of things going on, and I'm going to start in the middle. This section takes place in San Francisco in the mid-1960s. And, all right. The prophet was the first person I saw when I arrived in San Francisco, stepping off a Greyhound bus in search of a new life in 1964. I only remembered him later because his appearance was so unusual. His head was shaved then, and I noticed the way the light glinted off its rounded ridges, even though the sun was hidden behind a thick blanket of fog. I was cold, and I quickly passed this unusual-looking man playing a smooth-sounding saxophone, pea-green beret for collecting change at his feet. I'd have left a few coins if I'd had any. In the months that followed, I'd often seen him and began to think of him as something of a personal good luck charm. Early in the morning, I might see him walking through Golden Gate Park. He'd be whistling some jazz tune with his dog, a wiry-coated Jack Russell Terrier, walking by his side. Occasionally I recognized the tune he whistled, a scrap of Thelonious Monk or Sonny Rollins, but usually it was too obscure for me, or more likely, although I didn't know it then, a tune of his own composition. Evenings I might see him darting into a nightclub, sometimes with the guitar slung across his back. His hat would be pulled down low over his eyes, as if he didn't want anybody to know he'd been there. He'd wait until the set ended, talk in hushed tones to a couple of musicians, and then they quickly leave, often through a back door. But I'd also see him at the most unusual times, carrying a bouquet of sunflowers while skipping in the rain, working under the hood of a Pontiac in the dark of night, or playing an imaginary game of hoops in the panhandle without a ball. He'd catch the invisible basketball, cradling in his hands as he brought it into his body and pivoted, rose up and flicked it off his fingertips. The cement courts were a couple of 100 feet away and in the opposite direction of his shots. If he'd had a basketball, it would have bounded into traffic. The day when I talked to him for the first time, he sat stooped over on a bench not far from the merry-go-round in Golden Gate Park. It was the weekend, and there were children everywhere. In the middle of them all, the prophet, oblivious in concentration, rubbed his fingertips across the palms of either hand. His motions, strangely elegant, with purpose, reminded me of Tai Chi or a ritualized dance between partners. A butterfly, burnt orange with black stripes, drifted past his forehead, fluttered up and into the high blue sky. It was followed by another, blue and black with zigzag patterns. The next was olive brown with yellow spots. Butterflies flew, one after another, in a loose column above him. They flew out the palm of his hands every 3 or 4 seconds or so, it seemed, a variety of colors, patterns, and sizes, no two the same. When I looked up, the butterflies spread out and then regrouped into a long snaking column that twisted and curved. They formed into letters that changed my life forever. Florence. My name written in a cascade of shimmering colors above my head. "Hey," I said, laughing as I stepped forward. "How did you do that?" He smiled, tipped his cap. A butterfly 4 or 5 times larger than the others flew out from beneath it. The words life and death were written across its wings. It flew behind a copse of trees and disappeared. The prophet spread his arms out wide as he stood up from the bench. As he did so, there was a sound like the breaking of a tree limb, and the butterflies above my head scattered in all directions. "Kenny," he said, and stuck out his hand. He was younger than I thought, perhaps 18. I was 20. "That was beautiful," I said. "How?" He looked down at the ground. "It's just a magic trick, nothing special." He looked amazingly vulnerable, this young man who'd filled the sky with teeming imagination. He didn't seem to be flirting, but there was something he wanted. "I needed to talk to you," he said. Or maybe he was flirting. I wasn't used to feeling this out of my element. I was out for a stroll in the middle of the day in Golden Gate Park, surrounded by shouting children who'd all but disappeared. "Yes? I need a favor." He pulled the manila folder out from beneath the bench where it had rested on warm concrete, very carefully pulled out a sheaf of papers and handed them to me. I took the papers from him. They were hard to read, some sort of advertisement for a band named the Pathfinders, led by someone named the Prophet. The text had been hand-drawn in pencil on plastic stencils and then cut with some kind of blade. "That you?" I said. "The Prophet?" "Yes," he said. He shrugged. "A stage name. My brother started calling me that as a joke. It stuck." "What do you want me to do with these?" I asked. "I thought since you worked in an office." I did then, for a time, as a glorified coffee bringer, but how did he know? "You want me to make copies?" He nodded. "I can't make them myself," I told him, "but I can ask someone at the office who can use the Gestetner, the magic copy machine in those hallowed days before the internet and photocopiers in every drugstore." A week later, I joined the band as a backup singer. I joined up or was drafted when I came by the abandoned warehouse in the Mission where the band practiced, dropping off a second batch of flyers. Something had gone wrong and people were arguing. There must have been dozens of them, but at least 4 were quitting to form their own band. The Prophet's brother, Lamond, was yelling from the stage at the deserters. "You don't deserve to be paid," he yelled, gesturing at them, putting his hands in his pockets, then taking them out to curse at them and gesture again. The deserters were scurrying to pack their instruments and get out. Others were trying to engage those leaving in conversation to make some of them stay. It seemed like most of the people with the real instruments were leaving. Some of the people leaving were trying to convince some of the others to come with them. I heard more than one of those staying say, "The Prophet's here. Stay here. The money is bullshit." The Prophet himself stood aloof from it all at the back of the stage, half in darkness, talking to a large silhouette over his shoulder that I couldn't quite make out for a moment. It seemed distorted, its proportions stretched like a cartoon character's. I tried to keep to the side of the stage along the far wall, away from the people moving, stopping, clumping, arguing, fleeing for the doors, coming back to yell, a point, or going to the door to beg a friend to stay. The Prophet, Kenny, I finally saw, spoke to a black bear standing erect on 2 hind feet. It didn't appear to be someone in a costume. It was a bear, talking, gesturing in normal conversation as the two conferred. The bear caught my eye and nodded solemnly. Then it winked and turned and seemed to slip through a space in the back wall I hadn't noticed before, through a crack in the warped wood somewhere. Lamont had come down from the stage, yelling, and picked up a metal pole, hefting it, sending the remaining band, deserters and remainders alike, running out the door. The prophet turned to me and nodded once. What was that? It was nothing. The music was dying. We'll find other musicians. No, the bear. You saw it? He broke into a huge grin. He took my hand, removing his dark glasses from distraction, his attention focused on me, something electric arcing behind his eyes. Lamond, the prophet shouted. Lamond! Lamond stood in the doorway of the warehouse, waving his metal pipe, shouting something unintelligible and angry. Put that down. We have work to do, music to make. Like that, everything had changed again. Lamond turned, and seeing his brother suddenly so animated, Lamond's angry face drained of emotion. Then he smiled warily, hopefully. Music, he said. He looked doubtfully at the metal bar. Let's go round up our band from the bars and hideouts you sent them to. The prophet clapped Lamond on the shoulder and laughed. Meet Florence, he said, still holding my hand in his other hand. He gestured his arm out in a half turn, displaying me to Lamond. I'd seen him, but never been introduced. She's in the band, a backup singer. I can't sing, I said. Lamond's small smile seemed to fade, replaced by an, oh no, here we go again, look at resignation. We need real musicians this time, Lamond said in a flat tone, voicing an argument he had evidently made and lost too many times. She said she can't sing. It doesn't matter, the prophet said. You have style, he told me. I can see it. You have to sing with us. Say yes. His eyes burned into me. Lamond appeared displeased but resigned. Get something to wear, something with more colors, shorter and with baubles, beads, something freaky, and meet us back here. Let's go, he said to Lamond. Lamond nodded. Let's go, Lamond echoed it, and the brothers walked quickly into sunlight. I looked back one more time at the spot where the bear had been, and then I left the warehouse, closing the door on emptiness. Maybe in the darkness, at the back, animal eyes glittered. I went to the reopening of the Palace of Fine Arts. Oh, here we go. I skipped ahead. It was 2 more years before I saw the prophet again. I went back to work at the office, became a full-time secretary, and eased back into everyday life. I checked with Lamond a few times in the first couple of months, but nobody knew the prophet's whereabouts, and without the prophet, there was no band, no community. Lamond seemed concerned, but he said his brother would come back when he was ready. I wrote my name and phone number on a piece of paper, and I went back to work. My life was like the fairy tale of the 2 boys who wander into a cave only to discover that while they've been away, an entire generation has passed. I'd only been with the band a short time. 2 or 3 weeks before, the prophet had disappeared the first time. Then we had... But I found it very hard to readjust to living under corporate rules, but in time I managed. I went to the reopening of the Palace of Fine Arts in summer of 1966 with Roy, my boyfriend from accounting. The Palace of Fine Arts was all that remained of the 1950 Panama Pacific Exposition, a spectacular World's Fair that had returned San Francisco to international prominence after the desolation of the Great Earthquake of 1906. Not concerned with the longevity, the original Palace of Fine Art was built with plaster and burlap. The decayed landmark had recently been rebuilt with funding from a group of San Francisco boosters. Through the large crowd, I spotted the prophet sitting on a bench by a nearby lake, lobbing bits of bread to ducks. The prophet tossed the wadded-up bread over the heads of a picnicking family that seemed oblivious to his presence. We planned to meet Roy's friends, a couple who volunteered for a local children's charity and were interested in recruiting me to help out. They waited for us beside an ice cream vendor whose cart was nestled in the shade of a large flowering tree. I wanted the prophet to wave me over, but he didn't seem to notice I was there. I shook hands with Roy's friends quickly, a well-groomed but rather plain couple. They seemed flattered that anybody might care about anything they had to say. In truth, I'd have cut my arm with a knife right then just to feel something, anything. But the prophet? I hesitated a moment. The knife was probably safer, but what choice did I really have? I managed to disentangle myself, promising to return as quickly as I could, and made my way back along the path toward the prophet, ducking children and bicycle riders, nearly sending a roller skating child dressed in a frilly pink tutu into the drink. Her heels caught just in time, and she managed to stop her momentum and fall less than gracefully onto her backside. I was relieved when I found the prophet still sitting on his bench. He was no longer throwing the bits of wadded-up bread to the ducks. The ducks had made their way up the grass and were standing in a row before the bench while he fed them by hand. One of the ducks hopped up onto the bench beside him. "Don't be greedy," he scolded. To my amazement, the duck hopped down and took its place back in line. "Florence," he said, turning my way, "I'm glad you came back." I must have stood there dumbfounded, worried that if I said the wrong thing, he might vanish in a puff of smoke or turn into a butterfly or a duck and fly away. "I need to get another band together." I nodded. "My approach was all wrong," he told me. He stood up from the bench and took both my hands in his. He hugged me gently, turned me around so that we both faced the path. "I have so much to tell you," he said. "I've been doing everything all wrong. I see that now." If I didn't know him, I would have thought him crazed, but the light was back in his eye, and he was excited by the prospect of playing music again, with a band, with me. Nothing else mattered. I walked with the prophet and caught the bus back to his brother's house, leaving Roy and his friends waiting for me. When I saw Roy the next day at the office, he wouldn't talk to me, wouldn't even look me in the eye. None of it mattered, though, because I quit my job 2 days later and never saw Roy again, and didn't go back to work this time forever. Not anything most people would call work anyway. Each musician, the prophet told us, is a separate voice. Where before we worked on harmonies and chords, blending the voices of the singers into the melodies of the musicians until it was hard to tell where one stopped and another started, now the prophet instructed us in controlled dissidence. Every note we played or sung was meant to run counter to every other note. Like the Tower of Babel, the prophet said when we questioned him. Imagine the entire world praying to God all at the same time. What God hears isn't English or French. It's an amalgamation of all the language everywhere as one. He was trying to recreate through music the original language lost after the fall of Babel. Try as we might, though, none of us were very good at giving him what he wanted. It ran counter to everything we'd ever learned, ever played. He told us to be patient, that we'd get there eventually, himself included, but that it would take time. All right, so now we're going to skip ahead. There's going to be a scene that we're going to miss where the prophet gives Florence a book to hold for him that's then taken away by his brother Lamond. So we're coming in after that scene. I must have slept for I only found myself when I awoke. I didn't know how to put it. I awoke and saw something from the corner of my eye, out of focus, and when I turned to make it resolve itself and go away, there it still was, impossible, the unexpected, the prophet. "I'm glad you came," the prophet said. He was holding my hand as I lay flat on my back on green grass beneath the copse of tall trees, some kind of stiff cloth beneath me. He wore what he called his raiment, his work clothes, metallic gold cape and glittering bead skull cap, a faded Superman t-shirt, a short tight dress over tight black stretch pants, and dark glasses. When was this? How much time had passed? Where was I just a moment before? The trees shaded my view of where I was, but there was something not quite right about this place. The grass was too green, the sky not blue enough, and the air shimmered as if it were full of magic or radiation. as if glittering ash from a terrible explosion were raining gently upon us. In my present condition, all the shimmering did was to give me a headache. Where? Egypt, he said. This is it. You came through. I looked around. No pyramids, no desert, but a figure just out of reach of my vision where things blurred away seemed to be half man and half bird, or else the nose of his face was impossibly long. But that faded or withdrew. When? I asked. It's the Egypt from the world behind the sun, hiding in its shadow. I looked blank. Of my imagination, if you like, he said, the way I thought it would be at the very beginning of civilization. Back in time? No. There's no such thing as time. It's an illusion. Like this city, these trees, this sky. San Francisco, too, is an illusion. I've peeled away reality, stripped it, and replaced a small pocket of it with this sanctuary. I nodded as if I understood. Or, he added, it reached out to find me, maybe. I ignored that. This is where you were those 2 years? Something like that. On this hill? He shook his head, no. I've got something to show you, he said. Can you walk now? Surprisingly, I could. He helped me to my feet, and we walked up the path through the copse of trees to the top of the small hill. I found I now wore my sundreamer's outfit, a loud neon green short skirt, pantyhose with faint paisley print, and a tie-dye t-shirt hung with a pink boa. When had we changed? I still wore my slippers, though, as if to prove my memory had some value. I remembered the bear. I followed the bear. Where was he? I was not prepared for what I saw when we reached the summit. Row upon makeshift row of houses, yellow stone buildings, mazed with empty streets, unpaved and dusty. This was the place he'd called the city of the dead. It was a city. It went on, mazing streets, buildings piled haphazardly, as far as I could see before vision blurred. From heat or magic, I couldn't say. Suddenly people milled about everywhere, jamming the tiny streets with their day-to-day tasks. They didn't emerge from the buildings, they just filled it up like water poured into a glass. Dark-robed figures were gathered in front of what looked like a large public building. Everyone was robed, sandaled, many wearing skull caps to protect from the sun. Voices mingled in the late afternoon air, spirited jesting in a language I'd never heard before. I shrank back. Don't worry, he said. I won't let anything happen to you. He took my arm and led me out of the park and down a side street. The ground was solid. The smells of food and dust and waste were all unmistakable. The air was warm, hotter than it almost ever gets in San Francisco. The prophet led me down a street that ran alongside a short canal. It's all wrong, he told me. The Egyptians built their homes from mud and brick, not stone like this. They were farmers and craftsmen, scribes. This, he gestured in the circle above his head, is something else entirely. Do you mean to say that you created all of this? I asked incredulously. No, I think I was drawn to it. I think it's as real as the other Egypt, as San Francisco or New York. We get so wrapped up in the details of our everyday lives that we lose the ability to see the greater truths. I had no idea what he meant by that. Here we are. He pulled the curtain aside, hung from the balcony of a 2-story building, and ushered me inside into a small room. It contained a couple of pillows, a mat filled with straw, and covered with crude fabric. Several earthen plates, a few sheets of thick paper that might have been papyrus, a Fender Stratocaster guitar with rosewood fingerboard and 3-tone sunburst finish, and a saxophone. My teacher lived here, he said, but he's left. I can still use it, though. What greater truth? I asked. I still see what you see, don't I? Do you know what color blindness is, Florence? Like when someone sees the world in black and white, like a television set? No, that can happen, but it's rare. It's the inability that many people have to distinguish between the colors of a particular hue, red, blue, or yellow. My father is colorblind. He can't tell the difference between blue, violet, lavender, or purple. There are also people who can see subtler variations in color than the rest of us, just that there are people whose taste is more precise than the rest of us. They can tell you whether a pickle came out of a jar or a barrel. I can do something like that, but with sound. If I can make the right sound or melody, I can interact with it, become involved in the act of creation. I wasn't sure I understood him. He motioned me to sit. I knelt on my thigh at the edge of the makeshift bed. With great deliberation, he clasped his hands together in front of his chest, squeezing hard. He tapped his foot in a slow rhythm on the floor. Then very slowly he pulled his fingertips apart. The span between his thumb was dark, like the sky I'd fallen through when I tried to follow the bear. In the dark space, I suddenly remembered what I saw, or realized what it was I dreamed when I came from the hallway outside my apartment, here to this Egypt. How had I possibly forgotten? I stepped out my door and fell into stars, winking and burning, an expanse of space that seemed to go on for millions of miles, all of it now between the prophet's fingertips. Then the cloud of darkness and stars, galaxies spinning like jewels, closed in on itself and disappeared. His hand made a fist. "I'm so close," he said, "so close, but I don't know what to do. I need the book back." He glanced distracted at me, knowing he had imposed unwillingly to keep my gaze. He scratched his beard with those fingers that had opened on galaxies. I stared at them as they moved, but now that they were only fingers, thin and delicate. "It's all right," I said, looking up at him the first time, truly seeing the immense power coursing through him. How did he survive it day after day? "I need the book back, Florence. I should not have burdened you. You have it safe?" "How long ago had he left me with it?" "I think I have to leave you," I said. "I think I have to go." "The book." "Let it be so," said a voice from behind me. Turning my head, I made out the soft brown folds of skin hanging under the bear's arms, swaying like a curtain as he gestured out in earnest entreaty. "It's too late," the prophet said to the bear. "I have to go," I said. I even made to rise. I nodded politely at the bear like an acquaintance at a party, someone you had shared dope with or talked to about everything that mattered, but someone you wouldn't remember in the morning, and you knew it and were sorry about it. I wanted to forget what I knew, what I'd seen, to be myself forgotten. "I have to go," I repeated. I was thinking of getting my old job back, maybe getting myself into school, and never thinking about this or the prophet again. Suddenly I had hit a conceptual wall, the opposite of a conceptual breakthrough. I could understand no more. I could fit nothing new in my head. This had to stop, but first I had to find my way out of Egypt. "You didn't bring it?" the prophet said. I looked at him as I had never seen him. He looked scared, confused. "You don't have it?" the prophet said. "Lamont took it," I croaked. "What?" The prophet shouted and tried to grab me by the shoulders. I leapt back, and the bear, walking forward on all fours, stepped between us, blocking his path. "Lamont," he said, something fierce sparkling in his eyes. "Lamont," the prophet shouted, and the stone walls themselves seemed to warp as he shouted it, or billowed it in a wind as if they were curtains, but suddenly, without supports, loose. Through the warping, another presence slipped out of the edges of my vision and into the room, a long, lean, powerful shape, the wolf, tall, adorned with silver and gold armlets, wearing a short skirt like wrap and sandals. It had a man's body, if the man were 10 feet tall, and the wolf's face, cruel and sneering. "What's this?" he hissed. "Have you failed me?" I almost laughed. It had been a madwoman's laugh at the absurd danger. I was near hysteria. I was a little red, and we had taken the wrong road to Grandma's house. There wasn't a woodsman in sight. The bear bristled, fur rising on its back, and shoulders, but it stood only slowing, turning itself awkwardly, shambling forward a step, shaking as it rose up, looking dimly toward the wolf, as if not quite able to see him, and sniffing, swaying his head from side to side. Already heat, shimmer, and smoke filled the room and my brain until I could hardly see myself. I felt sick. There was no way out. "You're leading him too far," said the bear to the wolf. The wolf looked much more powerful, but kept his distance, seeming to hide behind the heat mirage. "What do you think is irrelevant?" the wolf said. "Enough," the prophet said. He waved his arms as if clearing cobwebs from a dusty corner. "Le Monde," he shouted. The world lurched. My vision contracted and everything went dark. I could hear the faint rhythm tapping of a nearby foot. The curtain rose on the stage. From there we could see a multitude clapping in anticipation. And then, all right. I think I'm going to stop there.
Thank you, Jacob. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, everybody, for coming on this absolutely frigid night. We really appreciate it. Stick around, get a drink, support the bar, support the series, and we will see. We have books for sale as well. Jacob's got some books, and we will see you next month. Thank you all.
You have been listening to the Fantastic Fiction at KGB reading series. Check out our website at kgbfantasticfiction.org and click on support if you'd like to help keep the series going. Anyway, that's our show. Thanks for listening and see you next month.